Welcome to Beyond Sunday at Seymour Heights, a podcast created to go beyond the Sunday service experience, exploring some of the deeper questions of our faith, and offering additional content from behind the scenes and from the cutting room floor. Today, I'm again joined by Jeremy and a new friend, Erica, as we continue our look at speaking truth to power. In this week's message, Harold talked about words as grace. So again, if you haven't checked out the message, go to our website or YouTube page and check out this week's message. So Erica and Jeremy, when we talk about words as grace, what comes to mind for you guys?
I would say, going with the theme of what we've talked about the last couple of weeks, being a teacher, I get evaluated several times by administrators, by people who've been doing the job longer than I have, and they have to tell me where I can get better. Mm-hmm. And that is a very hard thing to hear, because, and they say to you, I'm not being critical, I'm not trying to be harsh, I want you to be better. Right. And that's a really hard thing to take, and the mentors who are the best at it, I almost look forward to those meetings afterward, because I know even if they saw a hole in my practice, a hole in my ability, I know they're going to communicate it to me in a way that says, this will make you better. You're doing fine. This will make you better. And that's speaking truth to not power, speaking truth to not power from power, but giving grace as they try to make me better at what I'm doing.
What do they call it? There's an official term for it, like a grace sandwich, where it starts with like a positive, and then like, here's what you need to work on, and then they end with the positive. That always feels good. And that's a good leader.
Yeah, and most of them do it, but some are better than others at serving up that sandwich.
What about you, Erica?
I mean, I think the best example is, I have a couple friends that if they see me acting as a mother or a wife in a way that is not helpful, or a way that I could be better when I'm talking to my kids or my husband, and even ways I talk to myself, when they approach me with grace about it, it's not the defensive, no, I'm not, I'm fine. You know, they have that way of disarming me in their presence and showing me their care through their words, and that they want to help me and come alongside me, not that I'm not doing a good enough job.
Mm-hmm. So I appreciate both of you sharing that. And one of our goals, I want to jump back to a little bit, is with the podcast, is we want to get into the Word, right? Mm-hmm. And so his message, words as grace, you guys sharing some stories about that, I know is practical for us too. But as we look in to the Bible, we want to get into these stories because we want our people that are checking this out to get into the Word too, right? Don't just trust what we say about it. Get into the Word and hear how God is talking to you. And so as we think about the Bible, as we look in the Bible, what do you guys think when you think of stories just of grace in general?
Dibs on the Sunday school answer.
Okay.
Jesus.
Yes.
But sincerely.
But it's true. It's
true.
True.
The grace that he gave us, but also, what's that word? A parable for it. The prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Grace the father gives when he comes home.
Right.
When the son comes home and says, he's got this whole speech, and the father says, "You're mine."
Mm-hmm.
My mind kind of goes back to the Old Testament. I think of Ruth and Boaz.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when he looked at her, he had grace for her, and he cared for her, and he showed that. So I think throughout the Bible, we see, the Sunday school answer of course, God gives grace, but overall, his people do too. And I think we can see that in a couple different situations. But the one that comes to mind is Ruth and Boaz.
Yeah, I like that. And it is true. One of the things here at the church is to passionately pursue Jesus and challenge others to do that too, right? Mm-hmm. It's because Jesus seeked us out in that, right? God created that from the beginning, a way to return back to him. So as we think about grace, in words as grace, and back to our theme of speaking truth to power, is there a story that comes to mind where speaking truth to power with words of grace or actions of grace kind of comes to the forefront?
I think Esther is a really good example.
Right, and that's a lot of story in one, and there's a lot you can take away from that for sure. So let's dive into Esther. Last week we talked about the Babylonians, Jeremy,
Crack,
and
Shack, and Benny.
they've got some wicked ways of torturing, punishing people. But let's start with that then. So let's pick up at Babylon and let's get to the story of Esther.
Okay, so we talked about last week the Israelites did not follow God's instructions. He promised that he would give them into the hands of their enemies, and so the Babylonians took over. Then the Babylonians, also not a godly people, God sent a couple of visions that said, hey, Babylon, your time is coming. And so now we have the Medes and the Persians who came in and conquered Babylon, and even, I believe, was the subject of the writing on the wall saying, hey, your life and your kingdom are going to end. Somebody else is coming. And then the Medes and the Persians came in. So now the Israelites are still in exile. They're still spread out. And the Medes and Persians are in charge. And they are over, and I'm looking at the beginning of the story, it's 127 provinces from India all the way over to the Mediterranean, basically.
That's crazy, right?
So it's a massive, I mean, by today's standards, that's a massive amount of land.
And different things altogether. Think of like atmosphere, like environmental changes, right? People groups and their languages. And we talked about that last week a little bit of like, he had the statue. And you're like, okay, so is everybody kind of, worshiping towards that direction? But how do you even get a message that far away?
Yeah.
Hey, we've been taken over by, this Persian guy that's over
Right,
here.
and we've got social media, so we can get a message out quickly.
Right.
You got to send out your emails to volunteers, and you send the parent squares, things like that, or that's school.
That's school.
That's school. So many.
Q,
See, we've got
parent
all these
Q,
different parent
square.
Q. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same. But just imagine 127 provinces, and that some of the leaders would allow those provinces to maintain those cultures.
Right.
Except for moments where we hear about a golden statue or things like that, but people getting to kind of be themselves. So that's where we are when Esther comes into the picture.
Yeah, so we know, I think I said this right, Xerxes, right? King Xerxes. Yeah. He was married before he made Esther queen.
Yes.
And so, Erica, what happened? Do you want to fill us in a little bit? What happened to Queen Vashti?
Vashti. Well, I personally kind of like her. So.
She spoke her mind?
Yeah, she spoke
just
her
not
mind.
with grace.
She did not use grace. And we don't know exactly what she said, but the point is, the king was basically having a party, and had all his friends there, and to entertain them, he asked the queen to come and dance for them. Is the reference, and so he sends for her, but he's most likely drunk, and she's like, no. So she refuses, and he was trying to impress people. He wanted to show off his wife, and so he gets her to come. She refuses. That doesn't really sit well, and his friends kind of mock him for it, which you can kind of picture that. If she refuses, then everybody's going to think they can refuse you. And so the king gets mad, and Vashti was no longer queen after that.
Yeah, and so that opened the door for Esther. Now, we've not made the connection yet. Who is Esther in this picture, in this broader picture? So Esther is one of God's people, right? She's one of the Israelites, and so this position became open for a new queen, and
it's a different world,
right?
Yeah.
And so there was an opportunity, and she was a part of that, and her presence just stood out, and so the king said, "You're my new queen."
And I think it's important for us to notice when we say queen, the best picture we have in our minds today are of the Queen of England, who was strong and powerful and had the respect of those in her kingdom. The Queen of Persia did not carry with her that authority. She was under the king. So she didn't have the ability that queens today would have to influence their people and to lead. She was still considered property of the king. Right. And that's pretty much it.
It's also interesting to me as we go through this story, Vashti had to be summoned in this party that was a celebration of the king's greatness.
Right.
Esther, later in our story, has to go before the king, which means she's not even there. Right. So it's still that same, we talk about marriage, king and queen theoretically married, kind of doing life together.
You have the two thrones together.
Right. Theoretically. Even if she doesn't have power, you think, well, she's at least in the court, right?
Right.
She's not even in the room.
Not even in the room. And between both Vashti and Esther, you get to see no. She had to be summoned
Right.
to even be allowed in the room. And if she wasn't even allowed there. Even the queen, which is, kind of the buildup of Esther's fear, she wasn't even allowed in the room unless called there by the king, which is...
It's crazy, right?
It's weird.
It's not.
I guess we shouldn't say weird about different cultural...
It's just different for us.
Yeah.
Right?
I just can't imagine.
And I think you go back to the culture there too, right? Our culture says that women and men are equal, right? And so, yeah, speak your mind, come and share that. So it is different for us to go back that way. But so we've got Esther in a seat, right, in the picture. We know that's not a seat of power, right? But of course, our theme is speaking truth to power, and Esther gets to be the deliverer of that. And so let's finish painting the picture a little bit. So the Israelites, they've been taken over by this new group, and we know that there's bad news on the horizon for them. And so the theme or the name of this episode is about Haman. So let's paint the picture of Haman a little bit and what's going on with that.
Am I doing Haman? You doing Haman?
Doesn't matter to me. All right, let's talk Haman. So Haman's in the court. Haman is someone who has been given a lot of power by the king. And he likes that power. He likes the prestige with it. And it seems to be the custom, and maybe this is true for everybody in the court, but definitely for him, when he walks by, people bow. Mordecai, who is a cousin of Esther, is a God-fearing Jew. He basically says, I bow to no one but the king and God. Right. And Mordecai doesn't like that. So Mordecai hatches a plan to get rid of, ironically, not just Mordecai, but...
Haman hatches a plan.
Sorry.
Yes,
Haman hatches a plan.
There's a lot of names in this story.
Yes.
There are.
So,
so Haman hatches a plan to get rid of not just Mordecai, but Mordecai's entire race of people, which seems like a bit of an overreaction.
Right. For something that I feel like, and this is just a wonder, it doesn't say this in there, but it's something that he kind of created himself, right? Haman basically is drawing out this worship, right? This attention, right? Not everybody else. We don't know the whole story, right? But it's not like everybody else. Oh, anytime somebody comes through, you do this. But he's like drawing it out, right? And so then he takes that. He sees Mordecai is standing up for what he believes in, and it's not going with him. And so he's wanting to try to trap Mordecai. Like we talked about that with Daniel in the story of the Babylonians. So,
well, and it on that note, it almost seems interesting. We were talking about before. This book doesn't actually mention God by name. Right. But could it be that Mordecai went, or I don't know why I keep mixing them up. Haman went
Haman
after...
is bad, Mordecai is good.
Haman went after Mordecai's people because he knew the root of Mordecai's issue was his faith in God. Right. So even if it's not explicitly said, even if it's not, hey, we're going to go after all God's people. We're going to go after these people who won't bow to me. Right. And so it's interesting to see that almost implied presence of God without the explicit, he's there in the story.
Yeah. So there's a plan, an evil plan, right? That Haman has to go after God's people. And Mordecai happens to be related to this queen, right?
Right.
And so Mordecai has his own kind of plan to counteract this, right? So what does that look like?
Well, going back, Mordecai has a niche for discovering secret plans. So even before Haman hatched, or before Haman was put into power, Mordecai discovered there was a plot to kill the king and told Esther about it. Esther told the king, saved the king, and Mordecai was kind of a hero in that. Right. So that was before. Then when this plan against God's people is unveiled, Mordecai wants Esther to help and help save them, and he encourages her to say something, hoping that tie to her and her people will be enough, hopefully, for the king to overrule this evil plan. Like we have to do that now.
I know it's hard because we're holding the Bible, right? Sorry, one-handed evil plan.
See,
but
I went to new school. I got
that's good.
the phone
That's
Bible.
good. No, it's true though. So Mordecai gets a message. It's not a text message. We talked about this, right? He gets a message to the queen. And says, "Hey, this is what is on the street, right? This is the word on the street. This is what's coming down the pike."
Don't be said word on the street.
And says, "Hey, we need you to do something about it." And what was her initial reaction? Was it to jump up and go to the court of the king?
No, because that wasn't something she was allowed to do.
We talked about that earlier, right?
Yeah. She couldn't just go to the king and be like, "Hey, you got to stop this." That was a large risk to her life to even be able to question what Mordecai was saying to the king. So she encourages Mordecai. She's like, "Go be with our people and pray and fast about this, and I will too, because this isn't something that I can just do. This is a change to her life and possibly an end to her life if she does this."
I think it's an interesting combination of speaking truth to power that goes on in this story, because you have Esther who has to speak to the king, and there's a power inequality, whatever.
Right.
Power difference.
There you go.
And then you have Mordecai to Esther, peasant to queen. And then you have male relative to female relative, which is a power dynamic.
Right.
And it's like there's all of this web of
Tied in together.
speaking truth,
Right.
and all these different levels of power. And it's interesting to see how that builds to this story.
Right.
Of
It's
saving
really neat
God's
to
people.
see how the story unfolds with all of that.
Right.
And we know the end, right?
Right. We cheat because
I know.
we've read it already.
I know, it's good. So they do this. They pray. They fast. Mordecai, he's staying on the queen, right? Hey, so this is what we've done. What are you going to do about it, right? So now we get to the point where Esther, she's feeling called to do something. So she decides to do that. What's that look like?
I love in chapter 5 when it starts, she says, "Okay, I'm going to do this." She put on her royal robes, and I have to picture like she's getting ready to go see the king, and she's like, "All right, I'm going to wear the best thing. This is what I would do." We don't read this necessarily, but I'm going to do the best thing I can. I'm going to put my best foot forward. I'm going to look really good as I go into the king's quarters.
I'm also curious though, like her normal outfit is already got to be like really ornate.
She's the queen
Right.
of a giant empire.
Yeah, it's already got to be ornate, and then it calls out the fact that she's gonna even look better.
Royal
right?
robes, not just robes, royal robes.
Right.
Robes.
So she's probably dolled herself up a little bit. Like she's okay.
A little rouge.
This is fine.
They had that back then or not?
They have, I don't know. nice hairdo.
Right.
Under the headdress, I'm sure, but So when she enters the king's quarters, and it says when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. So you kind of picture that moment of she's like, okay,
He didn't tell me that I have
didn't
to
kill me, like we're good.
Yeah. Right, the thumbs up, thumbs down metric.
Got the thumbs up. That's a good start.
And so she was able to go up to the scepter, which was kind of her permission to speak.
Right.
And that's when he offers her, "What's your request? And I'll grant it." And I think that alone has to be like in my mind, had I been praying and fasting with my people, I go and do this. Oh, okay, this is the right thing to do. Like this is that peace that
God's
will take
name's
over.
not mentioned. Again, we said that.
Right.
But the presence of God
Right.
is felt throughout the story. And this is one of those times.
It's also interesting to me that he says, "I will give you anything up to half my kingdom," which seems like a thing.
Goes all
She
the
had
way
to
to
look.
India, too.
Right. So you can have all of India, and I'll
Right.
keep the rest, or you can have the other part, and I'll keep India. It's like,
She had to look great.
well, that. But I'm also, I believe that's also the offer that Herod makes in the New Testament
Ooh.
Right.
to his wife's daughter, and was that a thing kings went around doing? Like, you can have anything. You can have half my kingdom if you want. I'm like,
I have so much that doesn't matter. Just take half the kingdom. I don't care.
but also it's I wonder if at that point Esther knew that the request would be granted, because does half my kingdom fit all of the people that are Israelites?
Ooh.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder if that point she had her confidence, because she didn't even ask then.
Right.
No.
She invited him to dinner.
Well, and so let's stop there for a second, because he makes that request. She could have just said, she's feeling the spirit behind her, right? She could have just said, "Hey, I need you to take care of Haman and give me my people."
Right.
Right?
Which also, is she going
I know.
about Haman?
But just to draw back to how he started, right? This is words as grace, right? And so
Yeah.
this goes back to that thread of the fact that she doesn't come out that way, like this. She's got a plan or whatever. She comes, he offers that, and she says to him,
Come
"I'd like
to
to
dinner."
I'd like to prepare dinner for you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Haman. She
Right.
does, and that's
There's
the
a
part
lo-
I like. Like that's the. Can you and Haman come to dinner? Like that's that pull
Yeah.
into the situation.
Well, but then that also builds up to Haman going, "Yeah, I got invited.
Right.
The king and queen and me."
Yes.
No one else, just me.
Right.
That's, yeah, that's interesting. It's a fun.
So they have a dinner.
Not just they have a dinner. The king's like, "Let's go. We got to get to this dinner." He
Right.
says, "Bring him quickly so we can go." So like,
And this is not. I mean, this is probably, we talked about movies last week, right?
Yeah.
This is probably me like over I can't say the word. Dramatizing. There's the word.
Yeah.
Over dramatizing this look, but like it's like the grapes and like all like it's just like a feast,
Everything.
right? It's
Yeah.
a big dinner.
Yep.
So the dinner's prepared. She presents all of that, and you
I
would
always
think.
wonder. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm like looking at. She prepared the dinner. This is the queen of a vast empire. So I wonder, is this Esther, the peasant who was raised up to queen, who made the food herself and made this? Is it just the three of them, or does she have her own queenly palace? Remember, we talked about
Right.
she's
She
separate.
does.
She's separate.
Does she have her house full of servants prepare this feast for the three of
But
them?
he's used to that,
Right.
and so there is.
So I
again,
wonder-
this isn't in
No.
the Bible, but it is curious though. Of like, maybe she did have a special recipe of something that she,
Yeah.
like, and that won his favor. But so she gets to the point they have the dinner, and you think now she's got everybody happy and fed, and now she can bring up her presentation to the king. So what does she do?
She says, "Hey, will you come to another dinner?"
This is the.
like, you're like,
Like, this is it.
so
Nope.
I love eating, right?
Well, I think.
But
to
right after
impart
I'm
this-
full of like, hey, we're gonna have a better dinner. Can you come to the?
Well, I have to think like as a young woman, and I was in Bible college when I got married. So my freshman year, when we had the opportunity to have open dorms, so the guys would come into the girls' dorm and all that, and you'd look around and all of the girls are making dessert. Like that day, there was a waiting line for the oven
Yep.
because we're all told, "Oh, what's the way to a man's heart? His stomach." So you're going to make the best cookies. You're going to put those out in your room, and that's how you're going to find your future
Yeah.
husband, which is not the greatest method. But in this, she's made this great, she has this great dinner with them, and she's like, there's going to be an even better one. Like
Right.
there's a level to where this is like, okay, again, if this works, this is where I find my confidence. This will work out. And so
You do wonder. Again, it doesn't say it, but you do wonder: is there a little bit of a fleece moment?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like we keep testing it. Like, God, is this still what you're wanting us to do? Right? Is
Yeah.
this still the path you're wanting us to go? But there's also, back to our friend Haman, some more
Dun,
evil
dun,
plotting
dun.
happening behind this.
Right.
So what is Haman up to at his house?
So Haman is still working on his plan, which I believe. I can't remember. I need to probably go back and read that more closely. Not sure if he knows that Esther and Mordecai are together, but he's still harboring this, or related.
Right.
But he knows Mordecai's background, and so he's got this whole plan with the king. And at his house, he is setting up a gallows.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go nerdy Bible college kid here. It's always interesting looking at the translation in the Old Testament. This could either be a giant spike on which somebody is going to be impaled.
Speaking of giant, this translation says a 75-foot tall
Right.
spike.
Right.
Whoa!
Right. Which is, because all the translation, I've always, growing up, this is one of our stories we learn as kids.
Right.
And gallows, I was taught, was where you just hang somebody, like,
Right.
noose and all that, not to be morbid, but that's what, and then I find out this giant spike, and I'm like, man, this dude was sadistic. Like, on top of getting rid of a 75-foot pole.
Right. That's for attention, right?
Right.
Daredevil Falls at Dollywood is 50 feet tall. That's pretty tall, just to give a
Wow.
perspective.
Oh,
So
goodness.
25 feet taller than that point
Right.
is where this person is being, his idea is being impelled. Haman is planning to put Mordecai on the top
Right.
of that, right?
It always makes me want, the 7 times hotter.
Right.
Yeah.
For Rack Shack and Benny last
Right.
week, and now 50. Nah, make it 75 feet. It's like there's something.
That's also, hold on. Like, that's a really tall tree.
How did they even
That's a-
impale them on it?
You look at some of the makeup of the land, and like you think palm trees and sand near the beaches and stuff. Like, that's a solid tree.
Yeah.
So they bring in the 75-foot.
See, I have never thought about these things when I'm reading the Book of Esther. It's just really
Welcome
interesting
to Jeremy and Adams.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, but again, this goes back to how much hatred was in Haman's plan.
Right.
Because whether he had to go actually find a 75-foot tree, or he was willing to put people to work to build a
Yeah.
75-foot pole.
Right.
And I'm thinking off the top of my head, I could be wrong. It seems like the only way to do that would be to throw somebody off the side of
Something taller.
something tall, a castle,
Right.
I'm like, that's deep hatred.
Yeah.
Which, again, we're talking about a guy who was angry about one person
Right.
and wants to wipe out an entire people group.
Right.
And whew,
Well, and I think it's interesting because right after he leaves the banquet with Esther and the king, he's got that I had dinner with the king and queen, and he goes and he brags on himself to everyone he can gather together, his wife, and he talks about all of his splendor and riches. So it's not just, hey, let's go build this and the hatred, it's also the pride that he builds up in his own heart to make him hate Mordecai even more, because I'm worthy of bowing down,
yeah.
Yes, so let's jump into a little bit further ahead too is, and I'm trying to put this in the right order here, but I know Mordecai gets brought back in because the king's having a hard time sleeping, right?
Again, God's name isn't mentioned, but you have to think his
Right.
presence is there.
So the king's having a hard time sleeping. I don't know what you do. Nowadays you have a hard time sleeping. It's probably breaking out your cell phone, right? Because that's close.
Which is horrible for you.
But it's reading generally. Whether it's a social stream or whatever, you're swiping through something, right? And so the king orders somebody to bring him the scrolls, right? Let's review some history. Let's tell me some stories. And with that, who comes to the top? Was what you talked about earlier, Erica, was Mordecai helping save the king. So of all of the scrolls that could have been drawn, that scroll was drawn. That story was told back to the king, right? And so what does the king want to do? To bring honor to Mordecai, right?
Yeah.
So let's pick back up there.
He asked Haman, what should I do to honor somebody?
Oh, that's right.
I love
And
it.
Haman thinks that it's for him.
Right.
Which is,
That's even better.
it's so
Because this
perfect.
is when he's like, hey, we'll put him in the royal stuff and put him on the horse and like trot him through the...
This is the one the king likes. It's like,
Yes.
okay, good. Go do it for that guy you hate.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Oh.
So we
So
we
fun.
we do this part. We know that he's read this, and now we go into the second dinner, right? And then this is where Esther shares the plan or shares some of the connection with the king. And so this is coming from chapter 7. So let's pick it up there.
I love, so, again, the king is so impressed by this feast, and he's like, whatever you want. Just tell me what you want. What is it? And so in chapter 7, verse 3, she answers him, if I've found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish and my people for my request. So just stopping there for, the king, who has no idea any of this is going
Right.
on for Esther specifically, is like, wait, what do you mean your life? Like,
Yeah.
I
Who
can,
wants to hurt you?
again, we don't
Right.
hear that immediate reaction, but it's that what do you mean? She goes on to say, "For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king." Like, it's that beauty of she's making this appeal, not just because she's embarrassed, not just because she's mistreated, but for the life of her and her entire people.
Right.
She's asking him for that.
And just in that chunk of text right there goes back to this whole approach with grace, right? Could she have come out and said, yeah, Haman, he wants to kill us, right? And she does that. She does speak truth to this, but she does it in a way that's bringing the king around. She's doing it in a way using grace.
Right.
And so, of course, as I think I would be if I heard that from my wife, is who's coming after you? Like, where's this coming from, you know? And so he asks that question, who would do such a thing? And this is where she gets to speak the truth.
She gets to say it. And
That guy.
yeah.
Who happens to be across the table.
Just happens to be here. My translation says a foe and an enemy. So you're like building this picture, and then it's that wicked Haman.
Yeah.
And I just have to picture Haman's face in that moment of, because as she's describing
He's thinking
this,
he's getting ready to be put on this horse
Right.
in the royal
This
robes.
is it. And then he realizes, wait, could she be, like, I have to wonder, did he think, could she be a Jew? And that, you just feel that cold sweat of, oh, no.
Yeah. You ever feel the blood drain from your face?
Uh-huh.
And this is one of those.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I love the king's reaction. So mad he got up and walked out.
Right.
And it's funny to me. I'm like, because it says Haman knew the king had decided his fate because he walked outside. I'm like, did he think he was going to get a sword? Like,
Ooh.
I mean, maybe not, but
Right.
but it's like the king left. It said Haman knew, so Haman goes, "Please, Esther, please, Esther, please, Esther, please, 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 please."
What did it say? Like laying on her chair or something?
Well, oh.
But it said he'd already decided. Just as the king returned, Haman was falling on the couch
Yeah,
where Esther was like,
right.
like
Worst timing ever.
Right.
it's like, what are you thinking?
You've already threatened the queen. He just found out you're trying to kill his wife, and now you're begging for your life, but it does
Right.
not look good.
He walks in the door. What does it look like you're doing?
Exactly.
Well, it also, all of this with her revealing that it's Haman's plan. How much was the king involved in that plan? Because we know that the people going after Daniel got the king to put in writing what's going on.
Right.
If you pray to somebody else, you're going in the lion's den. In this case, was the king part of this? Because then at the end of this part, it says, hey, by the way, there's a 75-foot pole in Haman's
So
yard.
I wanted to go there, right? The fact that somebody had to bring that up to the king.
Right.
You know, that's what it said. I don't know if Harbona is the name here. One of the king's eunuchs said, Haman has set up this sharpened pole. And so it's like, you didn't hear the noise or like see this giant 75-foot structure, you know, going up. And again, I don't know where Haman's house is in comparison to the palace or how much the king moves around. But
I will say, 3 times in the book, we've been hearing about the king drinking a lot of wine.
That's
So,
maybe he just had somebody.
Maybe.
The hand of the king ran everything, and
yeah,
right.
he was just chilling.
but
Again, we don't know.
But Haman's messages went out by courier to all the provinces and all the places saying,
Well,
we're going to
and-
get rid of all the Israelites. It's like,
Right.
where's the king?
It does say, you know, Haman had to convince the king. There's certain people that have done this. He doesn't
He's not calling them out
say
yet.
the Jews.
Right. So it's I wonder,
He's painting a picture.
is the king just going, yeah, sure, I trust you?
Yeah.
Or does he believe that there's someone after him? I mean, you know, if you have power,
You're
you're afraid to
automatically-
lose it. But it's just, hey, there's this giant pole in Mordecai's yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the king signed off on the messages?
Kind of, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like a blank check, right? Doesn't say. So let's jump back to the fact that now I'm doing it. Haman
I'm sorry, I
is
messed it up.
laying at the feet of the queen at her couch, begging, and the king walks back in. Will you even assault the queen right here in the palace before my very eyes? So that sealed the fate, right, for Haman.
They said
he
as
knew
soon
that.
as that left, they covered Haman's face. Like the king didn't even want to look at him at that point.
So then the last verse from this tells us that the king decides to use the pole that he's made to go ahead and impale Haman, right? So back to our theme for today, Haman bites the dust on the pole that he had created for Mordecai. So it's an opportunity, right? We look at this story and we see how not only Esther encouraged Mordecai to not just immediately react, but to approach it with prayer, right? To approach it with fasting. And as we've said a couple of times now, even though the name of God is not mentioned in this book, that God's presence is felt in this, right? We know from when the scroll was picked up, when Queen Esther was able to go and she found favor with the king, right? God was going before her in this. And so one of the things that I want to encourage you out there with is for Esther, if she had delayed in doing what she knew God wanted her to do, the whole nation of Israel could have been wiped out. She knew that her time had come and that she had to do what God had called her to do. Lives depended on it. And so as we wrap up today, let's remember that Esther's example is the same. It's true for us, right, today, and that there are lives weighing in the balance, and the time is right for us to speak up and to speak with grace. Because maybe right now you can think of someone that God is on your heart to speak truth to, and maybe that's a hard truth. But if we approach that truth with grace, we can make an impact. When God calls us to fulfill his plan, then we need to do it. We need to do it now, no delays or excuses, because our mission as a church is to passionately pursue Jesus and challenge others to join us on that journey. So thanks for joining us today. We hope to see you at church, and we'll see you next time.